Hi, this is Rob talking enterprise architecture again tonight. It's January 4th, 2018. We just found out about two new huge vulnerabilities. And that's the Spectre and Meltdown. Now, what I really want to talk to you about, though, is technical debt. Actually, I'm going to talk to you about both of them because I don't think there's a better way to demonstrate technical debt than what we're just seeing right now. Now, sorry, I'm looking at my own reflection. Technical debt. Technical debt is how you can make a shortcut in one time, but you're going to wind up paying for it later. A lot of times they talk about this in some development that you are quick to market, then you're going to try to clean it up later on. But that's not the only time. Let's go back a little bit in time because today I think we hear a lot about how big this is going to be. Maybe you haven't, and that's even scarier because this is a huge deal. Now, I'm going to go back a little bit and talk about how mainframes work. Mainframes in the late 50s and 60s, the first computers were basically mainframes. That's a bus that cards were plugged into. They shared a single bus. The CPU, the central processing unit, was a traffic cop. It wound up, it would manage the size and the growth. So, for example, you needed to do processing. Processing was done by microprocessor cards and other pieces. So you would have an I/O card, which would connect to your data. You have UART cards to go back and forth from the users. So as you needed to expand, these systems were very good at that. Another thing they were good at was the OS was written directly for that unit. So what you had there was truly custom from one end to the other. This allowed for you to be able to work on a system, and it was very stable. There was not anything you could actually write into it very often because for the most part, it only knew what it was supposed to know. And it was written by the guys who built the hardware. So it was exceedingly ready to do what it needed to do. Over time, though, these were exceedingly expensive too. So only the biggest companies could have it. You know, GM would have it, but your mom and pop, no way. They were still doing things in the big books of ledgers and everything else. So computers really couldn't help a lot in that. Also, computers could do some basic ideas, but the whole idea of the bat computer, basically, where you hand something to it, it comes up with a message. No, none of that happened. Still not happened. But in this case, what you wanted was the ability to now go, the computers needed to go outside of the hugest of industry and go to the smaller industries. In comes the mini. So the companies decided they wanted a smaller unit and a smaller unit to get to the mom and pops. So what they would do is this would not be an expandable unit. You couldn't add more microprocessors. You couldn't add more connections. These minis were limited. But this also requested a whole different deal. The operating systems needed to be developed independently of the hardware. So Unix came around. Now I'm going to talk about Unix real quick. If you're a Unix expert, please just understand this is a very basic understanding, but it will explain. Unix is really just two files. It's a kernel and a shell. The kernel itself actually does the processing of data, but only the shell around it can handle and talk to the hardware. It's the only one that can talk to the applications. The applications can only talk to the shell itself. The kernel only really believes the only thing else in the universe is the shell. This allows for it to manage memory. This allows for it to do the things it needs to do. Now, this is a very stable model, but you got to remember what I said, that the one thing about mainframes, they were very stable. So if I take away the scalability, I can't take away the stability and make a viable business product. So Unix was designed to be exceedingly stable. Now, this lasted for quite a few years, and going by the mid 70s, they started going, wow, what if we could take computers into the home? And the personal computer was born. Now, but the personal computer was a scaled down mini, because minis were still expensive, okay? We're still talking much more money than you're going to put it under the Christmas tree. So we had to do something else. So what they wound up doing was they said, we've kind of established the Unix model really has become the way we do operating systems. So why don't we do that in the personal computer? Well, problem is the personal computer couldn't run the Unix kernel and could not run the Unix shell. But I wonder if it could run parts of it. So let's go back a little bit in time and pull something we had in the mainframe and pull it to the PC. So in this case, we kind of have the three-eyed monster of the PC. The video card in there would do some of its processing. That would take away from the kernel, so the kernel could still operate. So the kernel could actually send, for example, files over to the video card to do its processing to save cycles. Therefore, it's faster. Second, it would be able to handle other cards. Third, the kernel could talk sometimes directly to software. I'm not making this up. This is how it broke it. Now, here's when technical debt starts. At the same time, the processor was also designed to handle certain things. Rather than having the memory stacks and everything else you had in the minis, they came up with small registers inside of it, 10 64K registers. That's where you got your 640K of base memory from a long time ago. It was 10 64Ks. This was allowing the processor to have some very quick RAM or memory inside the processor. That has never left. Matter of fact, that was from the 8086, I believe, maybe the 8088. My point is since the 8086, and by the way, we still run an x86 architecture out there. That model has never changed. There's still those 10 deals. Thank you, Mac. You were actually really close to being perfect here. You had a model that didn't have the 10 registers, and your operating system was written for your kernel. You had an impressive deal. And so before we sit there and lay all the accolades on Steve Jobs, remember he changed that and went to the Intel model. So you're now viable. Please quit calling Steve Jobs brilliant. Sorry, that was an aside. So that's the mid-70s. Yeah, in the mid-70s. Meltdown and Spectre have now been able to figure out how to actually look into those 64K registers. The kernel itself now can also write, when it writes to those registers to read quickly for the processor, it now can write it to a separate spot. That's one of the things that the processor is doing. There are no passwords that's able to stop this. There's no other pieces able to stop this. This is how it's going to work. I'm sorry. People say, oh, I'm waiting for a patch. Wait for a while. Here's what happened, and here's how technical debt seems to snowball. So, early versions, we got a PC running. That's great. We had our application, we had our operating system, had certain requirements. We matched that up with a basic type of processor. Well, over time, we could have come up with ways to fix the processor. Could have. But the problem is the OS doesn't want to do that. So we'll keep those 64K registers. Next time we come out with an OS, go, well, the processor requires us to be able to use these. And I certainly want to be able to support this new processor, but I got to support this old processor. So it goes up again and again and again. 42 years later, not kidding, 42 years later, we're still doing the same thing. We've not addressed the original deal. Processing-wise, power-wise, we could have gotten rid of this issue a long time ago. The problem, though, is you would have had a day where you said you needed a new operating system, you needed a new PC, and these applications run on that, these applications run on that. because of compilers and issues like that. Now, we could have done some things that fake it, but yeah, that's it. Even the Linux kernel, which is a unit, the closest Unix you can get in the x86 model without going to Unix itself, it still had the ability to write to those 640K registers, or 64K registers. This is technical debt. So when you want to know what happens when you decide to cut a corner, get quicker to market, make sure you hit a deadline, that's not free. There's a technical debt, and this is the technical debt. Now we have the world's computers, which are now dominated, not just a little dominated by x86, completely dominated by x86, sharing a problem that started 40 something years ago. I want people to understand technical debt. I also want you to understand how we got to where we're at here. This is a big issue. This is not an accident. So thank you very much for watching. Do remember, enterprise architecture should simplify and should not mystify. And like it, tell your friends. I mean, I don't know, maybe they're on a bicycle and you're going, hey, don't ride a bicycle, watch Rob's videos. They'll appreciate it. Maybe I'll sing a Star Wars song again. But thank you very much, guys. Have a great day.